Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. This video is part of the YouTube series that I'm making called Zero to Hero Business Central. In this particular series, I already uploaded a few videos on my YouTube channel. In this particular video, we are going to learn about init and insert method. Also, we are going to learn about modify and modify all and delete all methods. So firstly, if you see over here, we have init and insert. If you see the definition of init, initializes a record in a table, this method assigns default values to each field in the record. For example, if I created a employee record to my employee table and I did initialization of employee record. So if I do this initialization, it is going to initialize all the fields in this particular employee record with default values. So do not worry about that. We are going to see that in code, in action. And if you see the insert method, it is going to insert a record into a table. So basically, we are going to initialize employee record with the init method. Once the record is initialized with default values, because we do not need default values, we are going to assign our own values to each field in the employee record. And once all the values are assigned to the fields, we are going to insert those fields into that particular record. That means the record gets inserted into a table. So let us actually see that in action. Firstly, if we go to our business central, in here you can see I have these many records available. I wanted to create an action button where I can actually create a new record in this particular table. Currently we have records till the employee ID 80, but I wanted to insert a new record. So let us see that in action. Let me actually create a new action button under the processing. As you have seen in my previous videos, we have employee page and employee table that we have created. So here I am going to copy this and let me actually paste in here, and let me call this as do record operations, because we are going to insert, modify and delete records in the table. So we can call this as do record operations. I need this variable to the employee operations code unit, but I do not need this particular code, and we are going to create our own procedure inside this employee operation. So let me go at the end and let me actually create a new procedure here called internal procedure insert a record, and let me do begin and end. Let me actually copy this code. I don't want to do this by myself, so let me paste in here. So let me, you can see in here we already have the init and employee ID is 80. Because this record already exists, I'm going to change the employee ID to 100. Employee name, let's call this John D by default. Employee age, let's call the employee age as 30. And here you can see we are inserting the employee record. So basically what we are doing here is we are firstly initializing with init method. Once we initialize, all the values or all the fields will be initialized with their default values. For example, employee ID, which is an integer, so it will be initialized with its default value 0, but we don't want that default value, so I am assigning employee ID as 100 and employee name as John D and employee age as 30. So let me actually publish this. And okay, I need to actually call this procedure. I did not actually call this from our action button. So let me go in here, employee page, and let me copy this and let me actually call the method insert record or procedure. And now let me actually publish this and let us see how it actually does the operation when we click on do record operations. So let me go to my business central, let me refresh it once, and I am already on the employee page. So here you can see I have new action button called do record operations, and if I click on this one, it should actually insert a new record inside my employee table. And let's see, here you can see It is inserted a new record with employee ID 100, employee name John D, and employee age as 30. So this is all about init and insert. Init is to initialize, insert is to insert the record inside table. And now let us see modify and modify all. So let me actually go to business central again, and here if I wanted to modify the age of John D, now I have inserted the employee John D with employee age 30, but now I realized that he is only 25. So I wanted to change the age of John D. To do that, I can actually use modify. So here you can see modify a record that already exists. So if I wanted to modify the fields of this particular record, I can use modify. So let us actually see that in action. So let me again open my Visual Studio Code. Let me go to insert record, but we are not going to use insert record, but we are going to create our own procedure called internal procedure called modify record, and in here we are going to write our own code. And let me actually copy this code to create the okay, it already gave me the code, so let me do this. And let's actually set filter on the employee ID. Okay, it's already good, but we, as we said, we don't want to actually change the employee name, but we only wanted to change the employee age to 25. Here I can also use set range. So set range, and now let me actually do this. So basically what we are doing is, okay, it is basically asking us to give it as an integer because this employee ID is an integer and we gave a text, so it was giving me the error. So here what we are doing is, firstly we are setting the range on employee ID with 100. So we wanted to retrieve this particular record, and once we do that, it is going to point to this record, and we are doing the find first. So we wanted to retrieve that particular record, this record with employee ID 100. Once we retrieve that record, we wanted to modify the age, so I'm giving the age as 25 and I'm modifying that. So let me actually call this procedure from our action button from here, and let me now publish this. So it is published. Let me refresh this once, and if I click on our do record operation, it should actually change the employee age where the employee ID is 100 to 25. So let's click on do record operations. Now here you can see the age is changed to 25. So if you wanted to change field values in a record which already exists, then you can go with modify. And here you can see we have one more procedure called, or function called, modify all, which is used to perform bulk updates of records. For example, let us say I wanted to change the employee age of all these records. It is a bulk update. Or if I wanted to change employee age for with employee ID 10 and 20, I can also do that. It's also bulk update. Or if I wanted to change like these many records employee age to a particular value, I can also do that. So let us actually see that in action. Let me again create a new procedure inside employee operations called modify all. So internal procedure modify all ages, and here let me actually take this. It is simple. First we need to take employee rec dot, here we do modify all. In here I'm going to change the employee age of all the records. So here you can see I did not apply any filter on this employee rec. So what it is going to do is, it is going to change the employee age of all the employee records. But for example, if I added filters at that time, the modify all will change the age of all the employees within that filter. But we wanted to change the age of all the employees in this particular employee tables with the age 35. So let me actually call this. Let me go in the page and call this procedure from here, and let me actually publish this, and let us see how it actually looks in the UI. So we published that, and let me actually refresh this. So now if I click on do record operation, it should actually change the employee age of all the records that are available over here with 35. So if I click on this, now here you can see the employee age is changed to 35 in all of these records. But let us say I wanted to change the employee age where the employee ID is lesser than 30. So let us actually see that in action as well. So if you see employee ID is 30, there are three records in here where the employee ID is equals or lesser than 30. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply a filter on the employee rec. Let me go employee rec and set filter where I'm going to say employee age should be lesser than or equal to, let's say, not employee age, employee id. Employee id should be lesser than or equal to 30, and we are going to modify them with age of 20. So basically what we are doing is we are setting a filter on the id where the id value should be lesser than or equal to 30. So we have these many records, three records, and we are going to update those employee ages with 20. So let me actually publish this, and let us see how that actually looks in the UI. So let me go to Business Central. Let me actually refresh this. And now let me actually click on this. If I click on this, it should actually change the employee age of all the records where the employee ID is lesser than or equal to 30. So let me click on this. Now here you can see it has changed the employee age of all the records where employee ID is lesser than 30. So if you wanted to modify records in bulk in a filtered or in a normal set, you can use modify all. Now here you can see I have delete and delete all. Delete and delete all works in a similar way as modify and modify all, but they actually delete records from the table. So if you see over here, the definition of delete says deletes a record that already exists. For example, let's say I wanted to delete this particular record where the employee ID is 100. So let me actually do that in action. Let me create a new procedure in here called, so let me actually copy this. It is going to help us in here, but let me actually say delete record, and I'm going to delete this particular record where the employee ID is 100. So firstly we are doing the set range on the employee ID with 100, and let me actually take this, and we are finding that record, because if you wanted to delete a record you should have that record. So I'm doing the find first, and here I am deleting that particular record. Let me actually call this procedure from here, control V. So we are going to call this procedure where we are actually deleting one particular record. So let me actually do control F5 to publish again, and it is published. So let me refresh this, and now let's actually click on do record operations. If I click on this one, it should actually delete this particular record. So now here you can see the record is deleted from the table. So deletes a record that already exists. So if you wanted to delete a particular record from a table, then you can go with delete function or delete method on a record variable. But if you wanted to delete bulk records like we did with modify all, but now we wanted to delete records in bulk. Again, let me go to employee page, and now let us actually delete all these records where the employee ID is lesser than or equal to 30. Or let us do differently now. Let me actually delete all the records inside employee table where the employee ID is greater than or equal to 50. So let me go in Visual Studio Code, and let me actually copy this modify all, this particular procedure, because we are going to just modify that procedure. So let me say delete delete all ages which are greater than, where where id greater than, let's say, yeah, id greater than 50. So this is our procedure name, and now let's actually do set filter, but now let's change this to greater than or equal to, and let me change this to 50. So now let's just only do delete all. So now what we are doing is we are actually setting the filter on employee ID where the employee ID should be greater than 50. So we are going to get all these records and we are going to delete all these records. So let me call this procedure from employee page, and let us see how that actually looks in the UI in action. So let me publish this. So we have set filter on employee ID should be greater than or equal to 50 and delete all. So let me refresh again, and now let me actually click on do record operations. At this time, if I click on this one, these three records where the employee ID is greater than or equal to 50 should get deleted from employee table. So just click on this one. Now here you can see those records are now gone. So that is delete all. If you wanted to perform bulk delete, you can go for delete all function or method on a record variable. So that's all in this particular video. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'll be uploading more videos in this particular series called Zero to Hero Business Central. If you don't want to miss them, you should definitely consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you.